We're good, Salman? السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه أما بعد. A very brief recap that last week we were looking at symptoms of the illnesses of the heart. And we've previously said that it is important for us to focus our attention on our hearts, for this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala looks into, and this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala judges by. And so even our actions, whether they are good actions and righteous actions and religious deeds that are beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the amount of reward that we will receive depends on the state of heart. And so if a heart is sincere, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will grant the maximum reward. If a heart is not sincere, then there will be some reward, but a person will not reap the full benefit of their deeds and their efforts. And so we said some of the symptoms of the illness and sickness of the heart is hypocrisy, where we show a certain, we display an attitude, we display a certain behavior, and our hearts are far from that. So we display righteousness when we do not have righteousness deep inside ourselves. Riya also is a sickness of the heart. To do things for show and ostentation, right? And usually these are good deeds so that people can praise me in relation to my piety and generosity and kindness and courage and so on and so forth. Also doubt. A person that doubts the revelation and doubts the information that is relayed to us by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam about Allah, anything that is in the Quran, doubting any concept of the Quran, doubting any concept of the ahadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is a symbol of sickness of the heart. This heart is not believing in Allah and His Messenger as it's supposed to be, and this is why there are doubts creeping. And so just getting a thought is different from a doubt that is deep within, where you are questioning concepts of the Quran or the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Suspicion of others is also a sign of an illness of the heart, because the true believer is commanded and encouraged to think good of other believers. Jealousy and envy, we delved into this, and we said that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that hasad eats away good deeds the way fire eats away firewood. And so envying people for the blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has granted them. A person should not envy another believer. And it's even worse when we envy somebody else, or we are jealous of somebody else because of their righteousness and their piety. Right? And why is this person able to do this? And so it's not in a productive way. You are hoping that they would fail, and you are hoping that they would stop doing the good deeds that they are doing. And this is not good. Rather, the envy that Rasulullah tells us about religious matters, he says that, he gave an example, the person to whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given the Quran and is reciting it day and night, and somebody who doesn't know the Quran says, I wish I could also learn the Quran so I can recite it. Or a person that is donating in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and is wealthy, and so you are allowed to envy them and say, I wish I had that kind of wealth so I could donate more in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But hoping that something is taken away from a person, this is the jealousy that is reprimanded and frowned upon or disliked. We said pride, considering oneself to be better than others, this is a sign of the sickness of the heart, because only Allah knows who is better, right? And the second is self-admiration. When you've done a good deed and you start to elevate, you feel within yourself that I'm such a great person. And this does not relate to other people. Perhaps you think everybody is good, but now you're thinking that I am also good. And so this is self-admiration. This is despised by by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because the true believer knows that any good quality I have in me, it is a blessing from Allah. Any good deed I do, it is ability given to me by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Mocking people and making fun of people for their appearance, the way they speak, the way they carry themselves, where they're from, their language, their color, whatever it is, intelligence. Mocking people is a sign of weakness in Iman, because it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who decides what people get. And so when you are mocking somebody else, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala very clearly said in the Quran, لا يسخر قوم من قوم عسى أن يكونوا خيرا منهم. One group of people or one individual should not mock another, because it may be that the one who is mocked is better than the one that is mocking. Al-hiqd wal-ghil, hatred deep within. And so we are only permitted to hate and dislike for the sake of Allah. And so if you hate someone and dislike them because of the way they look, because of the way that, their background, the language they speak, the color of their skin, something they have, if you hate someone for a reason other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then this is a sign of sickness of the heart. Losing hope in the mercy of Allah, sign of sickness of the heart. That heart is not believing. And when you start to think to yourself, I'm a lost cause, and there is no hope for me, and I've tried so hard, but what's the point? This is a sign that your heart is sick. Because a true believing heart knows that there is hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and in the mercy of Allah. And as long as I have remorse, then Allah will continue to forgive. But what happens is these whispers come from whom? Shaitan. Shaitan wants you to lose hope. إنه لا ييأس من روح الله إلا القوم الكافرون. Only a disbeliever loses hope, because the believer knows that there is always hope in Allah. He is Al-Kareem, the generous, and He is Al-Wadud, the loving, and He is Al-Rahim, the merciful. And so there is always hope. Not that we deserve anything. We don't deserve it. Anything that we have, do we deserve it? What have we? We have Iman. Do we deserve Iman? We practice certain rituals of Islam. Do we deserve that? That ability given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? The good things that you have in your life, do you think you deserve them? In the sense that, have you been thankful for them? Have you fulfilled the thankfulness and gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And yet, despite not being deserving, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showers us with more blessings. Some are temporary blessings in this world, and some are eternal. The fact that we stand every day in salah is a blessing from Allah. Think about our behavior in salah and how much we focus in salah. Do we deserve? Imagine Allah said, well, if you the way we deal with one another, I give you time, an audience, and you come and we're sitting and we're conversating and you're not paying attention, you keep looking at your phone, answering your phone, sending messages, looking at Instagram. What's going to happen? The next time I'm not going to want to sit with you. Waste of my time. But does Allah do that with us? We say Allahu Akbar, Allah is the greatest. We think about wife, children, parents, job, friends, activities, entertainment. All of these things come to our mind. Our future, our past, our possible future. All of these things we are thinking about. And yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you did that in Dhuhr, in Asr He says, come my servant, maybe this time you'll do it better. And so He gives you another ability, and you stand and you do the same thing, Allahu Akbar, and you don't pay attention to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Very briefly, this is the salah of the munafiq. We have a salah of a munafiq, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's messenger described the salah of the hypocrite as saying, they remember Allah very little. But it is a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Perhaps He sees that we are sincere and we want to get close to Him and we want to worship Him the way He deserves, but we have weaknesses. And so Allah overlooks those weaknesses and those shortcomings, and He rewards us by giving us more ability so that we can grow and we can get closer to Him. Having a lot of desire is a sign of the sickness of the heart. Desire and attachment to worldly pleasures excessively, right? Everybody likes life. Everybody loves life, right? Aisha radiallahu anha said, Ya Rasulullah, we fear death. What is it with us? We fear death. He said, this is the nature of the human being. We love life. We love wealth. Right? We love beauty. We love pleasurable things. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says there's no harm in that, as long as it is within a limit. And so all of your focus and all of your efforts should not be in order to fulfill your pleasures only. Think about what pleases Allah and seek to fulfill that. And so if a person finds themselves overly occupied with just worldly pleasures, that means the heart is sick. Why? Because the pleasures of the hereafter are better and everlasting. And so there should be some focus on that too. Loving others for loving people for other than Allah is also a sign of the sickness of the heart. If you don't think about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even if you admire something in someone, you know, in your child, in your spouse, in your parents, in your friends, you admire something and that makes you love them, you should think that whatever that is attracting you to that person, it's given by Allah. And so ultimately you love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you always keep Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in consideration. Also true is when you see somebody sinning, somebody away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, somebody rebelling against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but you're still attracted to them, you still love them, you have no problem with what they are doing, the decisions and the actions, then that is not to say that you can't love somebody who, Nuh alayhi salam loved his son. But when his son refused to answer the call, he said what? Very clearly, لا عاصم اليوم من أمر الله إلا من رحم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not help you, you will not be protected. And so when the crunch time comes, you stand with Allah and what pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Fearing other than Allah, which is all, we are all included in it. We fear other than Allah, even though we claim, I fear no one but Allah. You know, sometimes we have our discussions or arguments. I fear no one but Allah. But the truth is we fear everything except Allah. Everything and everyone. And Allah said it to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. وَتَخْشَى النَّاسَ وَاللَّهُ أَحَقُّ أَنْ You fear people, what people are going to think of you. Think about Allah. Don't concern yourself with people. Because ultimately it is only the judgment of Allah that counts. And ultimately it is only Allah that benefits. And it is only Allah that harms. Our fear of things, of the creation of Allah, is because of the potential harm that we see, that can reach us from that creature, from that creation, from that person, from that object. You fear the potential harm of that. And so if you fear something, my heart is weak, it is sick. Why? Because I should only fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Waswasa is a sign of sickness of the heart. That means shaitan is whispering. And it starts with very small things, right? Wudu, salah, purity. Have I made wudu? Have I not made wudu? Have I washed my hands? Have I not washed my hands? Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, repeating Fatiha 3-4 times. And so this means that my heart is not stable. Shaitan is having, and how do I deal with it? Disregard it completely. If it is a reoccurring thing, then I should disregard it and not pay attention to it. And remember that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, nowhere did Rasulullah say, wash your hands over 3 times. Right? Wash all of the limbs that you wash in wudu, you are encouraged to do it 3 times. After that, it is a waste of water and it is not the way of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? The hardness of the heart. The believer, even if they are negligent and a little bit distant, when they are reminded of Allah, when they are reminded of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when they are reminded of akhirah, when they are reminded of paradise and hellfire, their hearts soften. This is a sign of a healthy heart. But if you hear the Quran and you read meanings of the Quran where Allah is warning of a punishment, where Allah is warning of His judgment, where Allah is promising reward and retribution for good deeds, and you attend the funeral but it doesn't move you, and you hear so and so has died and so is terminally ill, and it doesn't move you, you just continue, as always, then there is a sign of the sickness of the heart, that the heart is sick. And so some other signs is, for example, not feeling guilty after committing a sin. And so it is possible that a person becomes weak, a believer, and they forget about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for a moment, and then they commit sin. But then immediately at some point after committing that sin, you should feel guilt. If you feel guilt for having done something wrong that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has forbidden or His Messenger has forbidden, then this is a good sign. That means your heart is alive. But if you feel no remorse, then I should think about the state of my heart. Also, finding pleasure in sinning is a symptom of what? The sickness of the heart. It is possible that a person has, they sin out of habit, and they have the guilt, and they say, I'm not going to do it anymore, and then it happens because it is a habit or an addiction. But even when they are sinning, they say, Allah, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be in this state. I don't want to, that I have a weakness. But a person who overly enjoys the sin, that means there is a sickness of the heart. Why? Because while you are enjoying that sin, you are not thinking of Allah. And a heart that does not think of Allah and consider what pleases and displeases Allah is a sick heart. Giving preference to this worldly life over akhirah, and matters of this worldly life over akhirah. So small examples, I can pray salah in the masjid, but because I am in the company of a friend, or I have something that I enjoy that I'm doing, or whatever it is, some worldly occupation or engagement that I enjoy or that I feel is necessary, holds me from offering salah in the masjid, or holds me from offering salah altogether, or holds me from paying my zakah and giving sadaqah. And so this is what? A sign that the heart is sick. Also, disliking the truth, whether that is in a discussion, or whether that is when you've done something wrong and somebody tells you. And so you could be in a state of anger and defend yourself a little bit, but if you have a believing heart, then at some point that should sink in and it should accept the truth, regardless of the way it was said to you or explained to you or whatever. You recognize the truth and you accept it. But if you don't and you dislike the truth, that means that you are on the path of falsehood, and you appreciate falsehood, because everything فَمَاذَا بَعْدَ الْحَقِّ إِلَّا الضَّلَالِ, Allah says, other than the truth there is only falsehood. And there are varieties of different categories of falsehood. There is only one truth, which is Quran. We are talking about things from a religious perspective, from a right and wrong, good and evil. It is only what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger determine as good. And what they determine as evil is evil. And if you dislike that, if we dislike that, that is a sign of the sickness of the heart. That you find the company of righteous people, you don't feel good in your skin. When you're sitting with religious people and in the masjid and people who worship Allah and have love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and are known for their piety, you can't relate, you just can't wait to escape. That means your heart is in a bad place. Because despite not being like them, Like the poet said, أحب الصالحين ولست منهم عسى الله أن يرزقني صلاحا. That I have love for the pious people despite not being among them, from them. And I hope that through that love, I will gain some righteousness myself. And so even if we cannot live up to, certain righteous people or pious people, or even just senior people in our community, because they've worshipped Allah more. And so in their company you should feel some sense of contentment and disrespect and love towards them for their closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and their many good deeds. They say that being madly in love is also a sign of sickness of the heart. This thing that is, that humanity is chasing, because there's no relationship with Allah, right? And so if there's no relationship with Allah and you have this ability to love, it has to be, this energy has to be, utilized somewhere. And so, there's this false dream that, that you may fall in love and, head over heels. And there is nothing wrong with loving, right? Rasulullah says, tahadu tahabu. If you want love to increase between one another in your community and in your family and in your circle of friends, then make salam, give gifts, be kind to one another, help one another, and Allah will increase that love and that compassion and that. But it is where you lose your sense of right and wrong, righteous and evil. And so what your beloved sees as right becomes right and good, and what they see as evil becomes, this is what you are worshipping someone now. This is beyond, and this is despised and disliked by Sharia. And so, losing control of yourself and of your judgment and of your decisions, and just sort of just melting away for love of another person is a sign of what? That your heart is sick, because this is a place only for Allah in the heart. Right? It is only Allah that a person is allowed to love to that extent. And it only makes sense to love only Allah to that extent. Because if you love someone for their beauty, then the creator of beauty is Allah. For their knowledge, the creator of knowledge is Allah. For their kindness and their good character, it is Allah. And ultimately, it is only Allah that is with you, that was with you before He created you. And when you were in your mother's womb, and when you came out into this world, and when you die you are in your grave, and when you stand up for judgment, and when you enter paradise, it is only Allah that is always with you. Everybody else, Jibreel alayhi salam came to Rasulullah and said, أحبب من شئت فإنك مفارقه. Love whom you want, you are going to be separated from them. Temporary separation, eternal separation, only Allah knows. Okay? And so this is not discouraging having love for others, and no, but it is, they say, أحبب حبيبك هونا ما. Right? Be in control of your emotions. Love people, but to the extent and limit where, they do not drive you to sin, they do not drive you to disobedience, they do not drive you to rebelling against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not recognizing righteousness and good and not recognizing evil and bad is a sign of weakness of the heart and sickness of the heart. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to enlighten our visions and to be able to deal with these sicknesses if we have them in our heart, and protect them from them if we do not have them. Subhanakallahumma